when I saw this leaf from an 1858 tabloid for sale by an antiquarian book dealer, and it held just a brief summary of what happened in Calais in August of 1858.
How's the volume?
Could be a
We
little
could
louder.
use more.
Okay.
All right, that's a summary of what happened.
Okay.
A young man named Ariel Martin went to the McKnight house, one of his neighbors not far off, to borrow his brother's rifle. I don't know why his brother's rifle was at the McKnight's house, but they didn't want to let him have it because there was something odd about Ariel. But he took it and a flask of powder, so that suggests to me it was a muzzle loading gun. And he went home, and the next morning he got up and he took the rifle and he went to the Wheelock house, and he knocked on the door. Rector Wheelock answered, told Ariel that her husband was mowing in the meadow nearby, and he stealthily made his way to the meadow, rested the muzzle of the rifle on the limb of a tree, and he shot his victim through the heart. He had just enough legs to run 30 feet to the stream and fell in there and died. That was Jetterson Wheelock, his first victim. Loading the gun as he went to the Goodell farm, and there Moses Goodell and his son and nephew and Lucius Ainsworth were all mowing. He chatted with the men, and then resting the muzzle of the rifle on top of a fence post, he shot Lucius Ainsworth and he fell dead. Loading his rifle, he made his way to Kent's Corner. This was, well, getting back to these photographs I have, I found them just incredibly interesting. Excuse me. Ariel Martin, his photograph reminded me a little bit of the actor Adam Driver. That's all the comic relief we have in this today. But if you were to look at the page from Frank Leslie's Weekly, you'll see that these images were all labeled as photographs and credited to S.O. Hersey. Now,
I have the thing about him.
I'll get to him in a second. You can tell these pictures are not photographs. They're woodcuts, and photography existed, as a technology for about the last 20 or 30 years, but the ability to print photographs in newspapers wouldn't exist for another 40. So all of these illustrated magazines like Harper's Weekly, Frank Leslie's Weekly, the Daily Graphic, they hired stables of artists to convert photographs into woodcuts they could print in their newspapers. Now, Frank Leslie had 300 people working in a building in New York City. 70 of them were artists grinding out these images, and the photographer gets all the credit. Now, I know I'd heard the name S.O. Hersey, and I thought maybe Jennifer had done some research.
I've run across
Here's the mic.
I've run across him researching other things in Calais. Samuel Owen Hersey, 1825 to 1907, grew up in Calais at the corner of Longmeadow Hill Road and Robinson Road. That house is just a flat place now, no more house. He was the sixth of 13 children. He married Callista Short, and they moved to Winter Street in Montpelier, and Samuel started a photography business on State Street in 2 different spots. He worked in several mediums, including daguerreotypes. Later, he and Callista switched to the food and hotel trade, leasing the Pavilion Hotel from the Boutwells. The Herseys then headed west to continue the food trade in Portland, Oregon. So that's
Now, reports of this murder, and people were just shocked by this murder. It seemed to be without rhyme or reason. They couldn't wrap their head around it, and it was reported in newspapers from coast to coast. The Boston papers had big feature stories, but here we have a paper in Buffalo, another one in Detroit, yeah, Indiana, Louisville, and there's one in Oroville, California. That's the one on the very bottom, and they get the story wrong. They say that when Recta Wheelock opened the door, Ariel Martin shot her dead. And of course that never happened, but they didn't have a wire service at the time to distribute the same story to all the papers, and they just sort of cobbled them piecemeal like the old game of telephone, where we'd pass a story down the line, and sometimes it was very different when it reached the other end. Ariel Martin was born in Calais in 1839. His father had died a couple of years before the murder, and his father was a small-scale farmer, a mechanic, and a very hard-drinking fellow. They said he loved his rum and not infrequently drank to excess. Ariel's mother was a Millerite, and I love this chart showing the calculations that William Miller used to prove without doubt that the end of the world would occur on December 31st, 1843. It's likely most people know stories of the Millerites here in Calais, and especially at the Old West Church. But I'll read a little bit that the great Calais historian Weston Cate wrote about it. Since the end of the world was coming, the Calais farmers saw no point in harvesting their crops. Some are said to have given away their possessions and abandoned their farms. Such was the power of their belief. At 5 before the hour of midnight, the congregation rose and sang, "Nearer, my God, to thee." As the clock struck midnight, several women screamed. And nothing happened. Quickly, one by one and in small groups, the shaken Calicites left the meeting house. I heard reports that those at the back kind of looked at each other through the insides of their eyes and got up and left, and sort of it was an evacuation from the back of the church. Another account says that a group in Calais sat atop a local church in their white gowns, coming down finally to the scoffing laughter of their neighbors. I love those cult stories. Well, she eventually turned away from the Millerites and embraced spiritualism. Now, today, it's amazing to think how popular spiritualism was in 19th century America. Whoops, I need to flip one. I'm going back to this, all right. And it grew. It started out in Western New York in the 1840s. It spread like wildfire across the East, and after the Civil War, people made grifters, fraudsters, and crooks made a fortune persuading people that they could be in contact with their departed loved ones. Ariel was always regarded by his acquaintances and neighbors as a stupid and inoffensive lad with hardly intellect enough to distinguish between right and wrong, although not sufficient to make any proficiency in learning. He spent a great share of his boyhood in hunting and fishing and working on the small farm upon which they lived. And this horror of a seemingly unprovoked murder by somebody who was mentally ill titillated a population accustomed to more prosaic terrors such as smallpox, yellow fever, cholera, the standard fear of 19th century life. The first accounts appeared in late July when Vermont newspapers reported, quote, "The bloodiest scene we have ever heard of in Vermont was enacted in Calais." Newspaper hyperbole, I'm sure. We learned from the initial newspaper reports, Mrs. Wheelock, and you can see, let's see. Oh yeah, let me see if I can.
It's a little button.
Yeah, right.
You want me to do it?
I'm trying to find,
it's on.
What do you look for?
the house
The
where
Martin
he got
house?
the gun.
It was up here. We'll see another.
Oh, okay, so
The gun was there, and this is the Martin house.
the Martin house.
And here's Apple Hill Road, Dugar Brook Road, North Calais Road. So this is like the Baby Beach at number 10. And then here's Mirror Lake Road that goes up to the Ormsby place. We're gonna talk about all of this.
So you can see how cross lots, it would have been easy for Ariel Martin to go to the Wheelocks.
And there was, I think that was where the gun was. And then his
McKnight
brother,
House.
his brother was over here, he was the owner of the gun.
Yeah. All right. I hope I didn't. Okay. So Mrs. Wheelock was not suspicious of the young man carrying a rifle because she knew him and directed him to the neighboring field where the young man carrying a rifle. He directed him to the neighboring field where Jennison was mowing, and when Mrs. Wheelock heard the report of a rifle and the startled cry of her husband, she ran to the field and found him dead in a brook that ran nearby. He had been shot through the heart. The ball had entered the right breast and come out the left side of the back, cutting off an artery. Martin, as we know, continued to the Moses Goodell farm, where Moses and the various Goodells and Lucius Ainsworth were haying, and Martin shot young Ainsworth and walked off. He continued on toward Kent's Corner, aiming his muzzle at the gun at two others as he made his way. And the Vermonter noted later that news of his arrival had preceded him, and on arrival he made no attempt to conceal the fact that he had killed Wheelock and Ainsworth, and coolly informed his listeners that he was on his way to the south part of town to shoot George Soper. Now, I think Soper was among the earliest in Calais to enlist in the Union Army and did die in the Civil War. Once in Kent's Corner, bystanders distracted Martin and took the rifle from him, and he was arrested at the general store and his hands bound. And the Washington County Jail, the new jail was being built, so Washington County Jail that they were building, and that building is still there on Lower Elm Street in Montpelier. It's been expanded to 3 full stories and a flat roof, and it's called the Oddfellows Hall. And if you look at this end of the building, you can see the brickwork of the roof of the original building in it. And the jail before that was the old Jacob Davis house. And that had been moved about 100 yards up Elm Street. And they wanted to put it on the side of the road, between the road and the river, and it was so big they had to cut it in half. And each half was facing Elm Street, and they had a covered walkway on the second story. That lasted there until about 1940, when the fellow that had that second-hand store, Barrett, tore it down to build his cinder block building.
Okay, Paul, while we have that stunning picture, could you point out some other landmarks? Just to the left of the courthouse, of the jailhouse?
Christchurch.
You
Yeah,
can see
Christchurch.
Christchurch when it still had a steeple, and there's the,
But you wanna use the mic?
oh, yeah, Christchurch.
And then there's the
Courthouse.
What street is it? Main or state?
Elm
Elm.
Street.
Oh, thank you, okay.
But it still had big elm trees, I guess.
I'm gonna do this
Okay.
next one.
Dillingham?
Oh, sorry. Let's see. The Free Press reporter attended the funeral services for Ainsworth and Goodell in Wheelock, and said, a great concourse of people and the saddest and most impressive of any that has ever occurred in the region. Lucius was buried in the Ainsworth Cemetery in East Calais, and Jennifer found Jetterson Wheelock's grave in Fairview Cemetery. And I think, Jennifer, you've got pictures of those markers. While in custody, Martin admitted that he intended to kill 6 individuals in all. A remark later in the Vermonter stated, quote, "The man was clearly insane, and with this defense he was ably represented by attorney Paul Dilling." Oh, you went to my end one.
No, it's right there.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be the, go up.
Oh, maybe.
No. Oh, no, I see. That's all right. There, we have several images. I was saving that with the last, because, all right. This is the portrait that Thomas Waterman Wood painted of Paul Dillingham from that drawing that had appeared in Frank Leslie's Illustrated Monthly. And Dillingham had served 2 terms as governor and had died in 1891, and his portrait was commissioned 10 years later. And the great portrait painter Thomas Waterman Wood was able to contrive this from the sketch that appeared in the Frank Leslie's Illustrated Weekly. The following March, the trial for murder commenced. Recta Wheelock, Jennison's widow, testified early in the proceedings. "I heard the report of a gun. I heard my husband's voice. I heard him cry out. As soon as Martin had gone, I went into the meadow and I found my husband by the brook. He was dead. I had been married 1 year, 10 months, and 2 days." Recta was followed on the witness stand by Moses Godell. Moses said, "I live about a mile from Jennerson Wheelock. I first saw Ariel Martin standing by the fence and said, 'Good morning.' He replied, 'Good morning.' The muzzle of his gun was running through the fence. I asked if he was hunting, and he said yes. Afterwards, Lucius Ainsworth came up and he talked to Martin. I did not hear the conversation. The next I heard was the report of the gun. Lucius, wait a minute. The next I heard was the report of the gun. Lucius Ainsworth fell. Says I, "Ariel, you have shot Lucius. I supposed it was an accident." Martin commenced loading his gun and started off. "I have been acquainted with Ariel Martin all his lifetime. I saw nothing unusual in his appearance that morning. I never heard anything about his being deranged." While Goodell ran to his son's house for help, Ainsworth somehow got up and made it into the house where he lay on the floor. He died about 11 that morning. Winslow Boudry saw Martin at the store at Kent's Corner, and having learned of the morning's events, asked Ariel why he shot the two men, he replied, "They were miserable cusses and not fit to live." With the conclusion of the testimony of the witnesses for the prosecution,
We don't have a good podium, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. The defense counsel, Paul Dillingham, addressed the jury. Dillingham said that the defense would not deny the testimony of the preceding witnesses, but instead would demonstrate that Ariel Martin was not and never had been of sound mind. Dillingham said he would show that there had never been a week, a month, or a day without there having been terrible pains in his head. Many a time he has proclaimed that everybody was his enemy, that they were trying to kill him. Sometimes he has run to the neighbors and said his father had killed his mother, and others that his father was killed. Dillingham called Abigail Martin, Ariel's mother, to the stand. She recalled the events that may have precipitated her son's mental illness. And this is her testimony. Ariel Martin is a son of mine. I call him 20 years old this spring. He had the whooping cough when he was 9 years old. He had the bronchitis and the catarrh at the same time. He was very sick. He had spells of being out of his mind. Sometimes they would last all night, sometimes half a day. Since his father died, he has been worse. At night, he wouldn't go to bed in his own room, but would fasten the doors and lie down in the kitchen with his gun beside him. He was afraid an enemy was coming to kill him. We would try to persuade him out of these notions. About 2 weeks before this affair happened, he kept traveling about, didn't eat any regular meals. I never heard him make any threats against these men. Several more witnesses attested to Ariel's delusional madness, and Rector McKnight recalled on the day before the murders, he came to her house to get a gun that had belonged to his brother. I told him he had no right to have that gun. He said if Simeon was here, he would let him have it. He took the gun down and went to the trunk and got powder. I heard them tell about him having crazy spells, but I never heard anything about them myself. Ariel's sister, Sabrina Carr, remarked that some in the family thought it was dangerous for Ariel to have a gun. The Montpelier physician had examined Ariel at length and concluded, I consider him somewhat afflicted with stupidity, but not with that imbecility that would absolve him from moral obligations. I thought he had no indications of insanity. Dr. Richardson later amended his opinion. He must have been laboring under an illusion. Two other local physicians, however, agreed that nothing in their examination of Ariel Martin supported a diagnosis of insanity. In his charge to the jury, Judge James Barrett reminded them that they were to hold Martin responsible for the crime unless they believed that the defense had proved that Ariel Martin was not sane when the crime was committed. Judge Barrett explained that it was not claimed that Martin was wholly and permanently insane, but that he was subjected to periods of being under illusion. The judge's detailed and elaborate charge to the jury appeared to direct a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. That, however, was not to be. That evening in March 1859, after 7 hours deliberation, they found Ariel Martin guilty and he was sentenced to death by hanging, the first capital punishment in Vermont in 25 years. An editorial in the Vermont Phoenix suggested that the citizens of Washington County were divided on the issue of Martin's competency, but the newspaper agreed with the verdict. Upon careful examination of the evidence, is that he was an ignorant, stupid, and naturally mischievous person, and no sufficient motive appears in which to ascribe the commission of these terrible homicides. There are not reasonable grounds for believing his mental or moral condition to be such as to relieve him from responsibility in the manner. As was the custom, oh, see, I'm supposed to, there, oh, that is right, all right. As was the custom, Martin was held at the state prison for 1 year, after which he was to be sent to the gallows. Before the sentence could be fulfilled, however, he died. He passed away of consumption or tuberculosis. There was also a petition to commute the sentence to life imprisonment, and that was granted, but again, it was granted after he had died at the prison. He died in, he died on April 4th, 1849. Paul Dillingham, his attorney, was recognized as one of Vermont's ablest attorneys and was credited with having drawn tears and verdicts from judges for over 50 years. His great reputation led him to be elected to governor twice. And after I had researched and read about this case, I wanted to see the grounds where it happened, and I looked at the old Beers atlases and other old maps and was absolutely confounded. I didn't know where to start, so I called somebody who was sure to know, Jennifer Boyer, within days, put a trail together, and we went to every house, and we found a surprise at the last one. So I'll turn this over to Jennifer.
So now I'm just gonna, and so this was the one that you were expecting to see, this Paul Dillingham one. I think you had it, see,
Yeah, that,
I was
gonna show that one and then show the Thomas Waterman Wood, and that was my punchline.
sorry. It didn't happen in my house. So, here, hold on. Can I have the... Okay, so... Sure, that would be great, because I also have this that I haven't really done. You might be able to lean your hand or something. Okay. Paul has presented amazing information about the murders and much more. I hope to fill in some texture to the story by looking at the people who were affected. Some of what follows is speculation on my part, using census and ancestry records, and if anyone can let me know of errors, I'd love to hear from you after the talk. Let's get oriented. On this 1858 map, note Nelson Pond up in the upper right, and then south of it, Wheelock Pond, which is our, also on the right, which is our current number 10. Note the names of the residents on this map, done in 1858. I found these locations to be surprisingly accurate. They're available for all Vermont towns. The families were descended from the earliest settlers to Calais, and some mentioned here were born in Massachusetts. They lived in a part of Calais that was rough farmland with steep valleys and many brooks. The hilltop in the middle between the kind of here, because there's Martins, and then here's some other people that were involved with this, and then others down here, and then over in here. But this hill that's empty is a high hill over 1,400 feet, but with decent terrain for farmland at the top. This 1873 map shows school district number 10 in the light area. It's kind of up next to Wheelock Pond. It's the source of the current pond name because it was the school district, number 10. Our pond, our number 10 pond was called Wheelock Pond on 1800s maps, and at some point it was Mirror Lake. So then Mirror Lake Road went up the hill there, it still maintains the pond's second name. 3 families suffered loss: the Ainsworths and the Wheelocks and the Martins. But the losses spread through the tight-knit Calais community. We found that 7 structures still stand directly connected to this story 167 years later. So then, whoops. Oh yeah, and this is my, so getting oriented here, I have kind of a star over the Thai hill, and then there's kind of this circle of families and things that are involved with this whole story that go around that hill. And that hill, it's kind of, this one is almost at the top. I can't remember the name of the people. But, so anyway, so Lucius, let's see. Lucius, he was the first one to die at 22 years old. He was murdered working at his uncle Moses Goodell's farm on Dugar Brook Road, now long owned by the Guy family. The old barn now struggles against gravity. And here is a picture of Moses Goodell's 1800s farmhouse that burned years ago and was rebuilt for the Guys with extensive help from the Calais community. Oops. Lucius's father, Lucius who had just died, he lived, he and his mother Betsy had 5 children, but Betsy died when Lucius was 10 years old. Now his father and stepmother Marianne were raising a new batch of 3 small children on Calais Road in North Calais. Lucius and his wife, Martha Blaisdell Ormsby's home was near them, and these might have been the 2 abandoned houses that you see on the Calais Road on the left coming from the south, just before the Y to North Calais Village or the number 10 pond access. They look a little old, lonely to me when I drive by, but they weren't always. My old friend Audrey LaFeria commented about many children in tiny houses, that they must have hung them on hooks. So back to the map that I did. When Lucius was murdered, he and Martha had been married 2 years, and she was left with 2 small children, Alson, 2 years, and little Lucius Alvin, 6 months. She was 20 years old. The 1860 census shows Martha as a pauper living with her children in the home of the Whites, John and Catherine White. It's right there. And that's one of those old houses that I just mentioned. So they were neighbors of Horace Ainsworth, her father, or his father. Lucius's father was right there, and the new mother. So Horace did not have extra room in their house because of the second wife and the 3 more kids. But the Smiths were older, not the Smiths, the Whites were older, having raised 9 children, and with just their youngest son, William, still at home, they had some room for the widow's family. Martha's pauper status refers to the law that stated towns must arrange for the care of homeless residents in need, but I assume this arrangement was between kind neighbors. In 1865, Martha wed Isaac Prentice of Worcester. Isaac adopted her younger son, Alson, who was now 7. The 1870 census shows that her older son, Lucius Jr., age 9, was adopted by Silas and Catherine Jones, who lived they lived nearby on Jack Hill Road, near North Calais, and whose son was grown. Silas was a blacksmith and farmer. Lucius had a few more years of school and then would be a handy extra set of hands for the family. And I'm sure he had contact with his birth family a lot. So Jennerson Wheelock was the second one murdered by Ariel. He was the son of Silas Wheelock, a religious elder, according to the Forever Calais by Weston Case. Silas's farmhouse still stands at 1313 Apple Hill Road. It has a nice flock of goats, as well as horses, chickens, and geese. The Jennersons' farm was around the corner on Dugar Brook Road. It's the one on the right, and is still there. No farm animals that I could see. Jennerson married Recta Christiana Ormsby in 1857, and they had been married 18 months when he was killed. They had no children, so she moved back in with her parents, Thomas Jefferson Ormsby and Sally, on the top of Mirror Lake Road. They were neighbors of Ariel's oldest brother, Simeon Martin, who had owned the Faithful rifle. Ariel had gotten it from Amasa McKnight, quite close to Simeon's house, but on Baden Camoli Road. The house no longer stands, but the farm roads are still there. So here are the Mirror Lake houses that stand. In 1863, the widow Recta married Jennerson's cousin Henry P. Wheelock from the Max Gray Road area, and their daughter Lizzie Arabella was born. But in 1865, Henry succumbed to consumption, tuberculosis. The 1870 census shows that Recta has again moved in with her parents, Thomas and Sally, on Mirror Lake Road. In 1871, she married Andrew Haskell of the East Hill area, and they had a son, Willie. 14 years later, Haskell died of a brain aneurysm in 1884 after Lizzie had grown and married. Recta and Willie moved back in with her parents on Mirror Lake Road, and she kept it after her parents passed away. She lived to a ripe old age of 88 and survived 3 husbands. Let's see. Okay, back to the map. So here are Mirror Lake Road, which is the windy road. I suggest that people drive up there. It's a public road. Beautiful views at the top and open fields. And then Dugar Brook over here with Mr. Goodell. And then the Wheelock house, and then the Martin house at a dead-end road. Yep.
I have a question about that little short stretch where it says Martin. Does that little part of the road have a name?
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Back to the map. Okay, so I've said that, and now we move on to Ariel Martin's story. Here is where the Martins lived at the upper left. We just went through that. By road, Ariel's walk would have been long, but since the area between the roads was open fields, and he crisscrossed the high fields, which were close together as the crow flies. Note that the dead-end road is where the Martin farm is. The house still shows on a 1940 topo map, but all that is left of the Martin buildings is a cellar hole. Melanie Vietz, the current owner, lives in a newer house and has long filled her fields with merino sheep. The road is still a town road, moved slightly from where it was in the 1800s. It is Town Highway 23 or La Valley Road. There's a sign. So Ariel's story. He was the 9th and last child born to Abigail, the Millerite, and Ariel Martin Sr., the heavy drinker. Their 9 children were born 16 years, over 16 years, and they were a typical rural family with a lot of children. Abigail's first child, Simeon, was born in 1823 when she was 25, and her 9th, Ariel, was born in 1838 when she was 41. Her husband died in 1855, 3 years before the murders. I imagine a family in stress. At the time of the murders in 1858, the 2 youngest sons, Charles and Ariel, were still at home with Abigail. We get valuable information from the 1860 census 2 years after the murder, showing that son Charles is farming their land, and 2 Goodells are living with her too. Dexter, helping with the farming, and his mother Rhoda, 53, who had been in Ainsworth. Rhoda's husband, Joshua B. Goodell, had died in 1856. We can assume Abigail's farm provided sustenance for 4 residents, 2 of them widows. This is the crude cemetery near the Martin Cellar Hole. It's like a family cemetery. Abigail died 5 years after her son Ariel died in prison. The only clearly marked gravestone in the Martin Cemetery was Andrew Jackson Martin's, Ariel's older brother, who later took over the farm. Interestingly, Andrew was one of 6, I just found another one. Interestingly, Andrew was one of 6 men named after U.S. presidents in the small neighborhood we have studied. Must have been a little fad back in the day. Ariel's grave might also be here, or he could have been buried at the Windsor jail if the family didn't claim the body. This Calais section of the 1883 Child's Directory, 25 years after the murders, lists addresses for 4 Wheelock families, 3 Ormsby families, 11 Martin families, and 15 Ainsworth families. Hardy stock. I've come away with a deep respect for the resilience of the Vermonters in the 1800s, especially the women. They were dependent on marriage for their safety and well-being, but needed to be resourceful after losses like what we've seen here, where so many citizens died early, before the age of modern medicine and basic social services. Widespread homegrown community support kept the families afloat. So it's cut off a little bit, but let's see. So one murder victim, Jennerson Wheelock, is buried at the Fairview Cemetery, also known as the Bliss Cemetery, east of Calais Village. The other, Lucius Ainsworth, and I'm still a little confused about the U and the O, but I didn't have time to research it because it's an O on his grave. The community gave the 2 young men a joint memorial service acknowledging the shared pain suffered by so many. So that's our story, and we welcome comments.
We have the lights.
So anybody have any musings or comments or questions? I know we have a Wheelock in the room. I saw her slip in. Dan, who married into the Wheelock family.
I did, and my father's family was Ainsworth's, and my grandmother's family was Macknights. So
And had you
it's
heard?
very interesting.
And did you hear the story?
I never did.
Carried down. Wow.
No.
So it's kind of
Yeah.
wrinkling your roots a little.
So you didn't hear the story, or you did?
No, I didn't.
Oh. And this is only,
What I was realizing from looking at the rest of the old maps is that there's so many of these families, and they're not intermarried, but related in so many ways, because it was a small town, and so everybody was somebody's aunt or grandmother or something.
I have a question. Paul, have you've written about Sleeping Lucy Ainsworth, haven't you, the psychic?
Right, yeah.
So the closest I can understand is that I think that she is in one of the houses. She lived in one of the 2 houses you showed as the Ainsworth houses, right there. So Sleeping Lucy, one of Vermont's most famous psychics. Maybe you know the answer to this.
No, I don't.
I'm just wondering if Lucy and Lucius could be related.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, there'd be some time some time looking at Ancestry.com.
Yeah, but I mean, just like with the similarity of the first name as well, suggests that kind of familial.
Was Lucy from Calais before she was in Montpelier?
Yeah, so she was in North Calais. So, and I've always guessed based on those early maps that.
And she was at, what was her last name?
She was in Ainsworth.
So 14 Ainsworths
Yeah,
in 1883.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
lots of Ainsworths.
That's a good item to research, though. You need to
Yeah.
It'd be
find
kind
out.
of interesting, yeah.
It was Ainsworth's and, it was the Ainsworth State Park down by Williamstown. The
Yeah.
Ainsworth General Store was the,
We didn't show that.
one of Thomas Watterson Wood's most famous paintings is of the general store in Williamstown. It's the Ainsworth Store.
Oh,
Tony and I served with David Ainsworth in the legislature. He was a farmer from South Royalton that went back 6 generations. So the Ainsworths are a big family, and I'm also curious about the Wheelocks, because I wonder if they go back to Eleazar Wheelock of Dartmouth and
Yeah,
from the
Abijah
town of
was
Wheelock
the-
in Vermont.
Yeah,
These
Abijah
are
settled
really
it.
yeah.
key families of the beginning of the state.
Yeah.
We've got so many. And then afterwards, we're gonna go tic-tac-toe down to the corner. So in a minute, ma'am.
So I have a comment that's hearsay. Juanita Nunn couldn't be here tonight, because I don't see her, but she told me that she believes Ariel Martin was one of Ike Hudson's great something uncles, for those of you who knew Ike. And a question I have, because we're talking about who's considered a pauper, is whether Calais had a poor farm.
Yes.
So the
poor farms were later. They were more like the late 1800s and into the early 1900s. This thing of people trying to find homes with neighbors or whatever was the early version. So,
Somebody in the back would like to.
I don't have that much to say except for my grandmother, my mother's mother was a Ballantyne, and we were related to the Wheelocks and Ainsworths. And found after I moved here to North Calais that we like settled the village, so big history here. And I didn't know anything about these murders either. So where exactly did they take place? Was it up at the Martin, or like number Mirror Lake Road, at the end of Mirror Lake Road, or?
see, this is Dugar Brook Road. It goes, North Calais Road is here.
Yes.
And Dugar Brook goes all the way over, and then over a county road.
Right.
You know, that whole.
Yeah.
So, one of the murders was here.
At that intersection, like at the bottom of Van Camoli, where Dugar goes
Well, it's not, Bing Camoli's right up here.
Oh, okay.
There's sort of this big curve in Dugar Brook, and and then it goes a little bit more straight. There used to be the Fay Sawmill, I think, right here. And so that was the first one. Then the second one was down at Moses Goodell's, which is closer to North Calais Road.
So Moses Goodell's is right here, the one where we saw the barn that still stands. And I bet that there's people in this room that helped rebuild the guy's house, because that was a big Calais group effort. And Doug Guy still lives there. We visited him.
I wonder if he smoked a pipe.
Oh,
Doug smoked
wait, do you
a pipe.
remember? We came and visited you.
We talked quite a while.
Yeah, and I was, we sold your work at the Artisan's Hand.
Okay.
So I knew your beautiful, beautiful ducks.
We talked about how different this would have looked with no trees.
Yes.
There'd be just maybe ridges and not a tree in sight.
Yes, and it's all woods now, but that was, you probably could have seen from house to house
Yes, you could
up
have.
at the top. Do you remember it?
When I was young, I could see up to the Benjamins on the top of Jack Hill.
Wow.
And I could see Scribner's house.
Right, it's really different now.
Do you want to send, do you have anything else? Because the guys have a long history in that area.
Dorothy Singleton has photos taken by a grandfather who ran a photo studio in North Calais. So she's got photos like taken up by the spring 100 years ago. And instead of looking on Mirror Lake Hill and trees, it's stone walls and fields.
And people say, talk about the roads, because there's farm roads all through there now.
Oh, there are. There's shortcuts everywhere, but most of them we couldn't find anymore at all, like a lot of the burned out house foundations.
Right.
There's mills on every one of these streams. There was a sawmill just up the road from my place.
Does Fay Mill sound right? The Fay
It might be.
family?
And we had a turpentine still on our place. Down the road further was a starch place where they would take potatoes, mash them, roll them down to ship powdered starch in barrels to Boston. It was a very different community and industrial center. And you look around the buildings around the outpour of Number 10 Pond, all those foundations, that was an industrial center.
Right, so
It's changed.
you're talking about in here?
Yep, right in that stretch. In the
And
spring.
and so here, could I have this? Because this is, so
I talked to a couple of the owners of these two houses that are abandoned, and one of the owners said that there was another one on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
So it could have been two Ainsworths and one White, but there was a school up in here. It was very dense, densely populated. So, thank you, Doug.
I'm curious about the name Dugar Brook. Were there people named Dugar? How did that come about?
Somebody thinks Worcester.
Dugar is in Montpelier Cemetery.
Wait a minute,
Thank you, Sandra. I wonder about number 10 and calamities. A lot of these seem to be circled around number 10, and there was at least one other calamity. Were there any more?
Yeah.
In the water.
So Chris Reed, in his ability to joke, said there must have been something in the water.
And Paul wrote a book about one of those calamities.
Well, a small piece of the book.
Right.
Did somebody else back here have a question?
The people set to go to the island at the end of number 10 Pond for a picnic. And the owner of the boat had lashed two boats together, and those people all clambered onto the boats, and the wind came up and the boats overturned, and 5 people went into the water, and they found them all except for one. They never found one, maybe caught up in the roots under the water. The water is about 100 feet deep right there. But that was a calamity at number 10 Pond. One of them.
One of them was a McKnight. Yeah, some of them were teach outs.
The teach outs,
Yeah.
Okay, anything else to toss in before we?
I feel so much good energy around Mirror Lake, you know, it's all such a magic lake, and where I feel some strange energy is up at the end of Mirror Lake Road, up in there. It's kind of funky up in there.
Well, let's give Paul and Jennifer another round of appreciation. And I can't say why inside, but these murder stories get everybody out. So, thank you for coming tonight, everybody, and if you can gently extract yourself, your belongings, maybe fold up your chairs, and there are 2 racks for them in the back. But just move slowly and watch your step going out and watch your steps and drive on the road. And come see us next month. Thanks for the great turnout.